welcome to this edition of the Economy Report. I'm Guo in Beijing. Now let's take a look at the U.S. stocks from our correspondent Wan in New York.
Okay, let's take a look at U.S. stocks market. U.S. stocks closed higher on Thursday as investors digested economic data, retail giant Target's bright outlook, and Fed Chair Yellen's latest speech. Last week, the advance figure for seasonally adjusted initial claims was 247,000, a decrease of 3,000 from the previous week's revised level, the Labor Department said on Thursday. In a separate report, the department said that the seasonally adjusted producer price index for final demand increased 0.1% in June, above economists' expectations. Final demand prices were unchanged in May and rose 0.5% in April. On Wednesday, Wall Street cheered over Yellen's view of gradual increase in rates. All three major indices posted solid gains. Yellen said that the central bank is likely to start reducing its massive $4.5 trillion balance sheet later this year. She added that the Fed is monitoring low inflation as it remains one of the major uncertainties in the economic outlook. This is Wang Wen reporting from New York Stock Exchange.
Thank you. Now let's take a look at the agriculture futures.
Happy Thursday to you from the floor of the CME here in Chicago. I'm Oliver Slope with II Trader in your grain market update. We are seeing some continued pressure in the grains. Corn, soybeans, wheat, all seeing some follow-through selling after yesterday's USDA report, and a little bit better weather forecast going forward into the weekend, which could give some producers some much-wanted precipitation. Now, as far as the soybeans are concerned, $10 is the line in the sand. This is very psychologically significant to us. If the bulls are able to close above this, I think they maintain momentum going into the weekend. Lastly, wrapping things up with the wheat market, a lot wider of ranges. Volatility oftentimes invites more volatility in the market, and that's definitely what we're seeing, not only in Chicago wheat, but Minneapolis wheat and Kansas City wheat as well. So that's what we're looking at to round out the week. That's what you should be looking at too. This has been Oliver Slope with II Trader from the floor of the CME.
Appreciate it, and we'll keep you updated on the daily agriculture futures. Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Economy Report. I'm Guo Wei in Beijing. U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen has predicted that a strong labor market and rising imported prices could push up inflation. And here's a look.
Yellen said in her testimony to the U.S. State Banking Committee, quote, "It's premature to conclude that the underlying inflation trend is falling well short of 2%. She said the Fed officials were cautious of the recent low inflation readings. Using its preferred index, the Fed said inflation increased 1.4% in May year-on-year. This is lower than 1.5% in April and 1.6% in March. Yellen said the dip in inflation was probably due to some special one-time transitory factors. Despite the soft figures, she said it probably remains prudent to continue on a gradual path of rate increases. In regard to the central bank's plan to wind down its $4.5 trillion balance sheet, Yellen reiterated that the balance sheet reduction will be conducted in a gradual and predictable way.
U.S. President Donald Trump has hinted that the U.S. might change its position on the Paris Climate Agreement. The news comes a month after the U.S. withdrew from the accord, sparking protests around the world.
Donald Trump arrived in French capital on Thursday for a flying visit. At a joint press conference, Trump said the two nations have occasional disagreements, but that would not disrupt a friendship that dates back to the American Revolution. He also said something could happen with respect to the Paris Accord. Let's see what happens. French President Emmanuel Macron said, "On climate, we know our disagreements. I respect the decision of President Trump, but I remain attached to the Paris Agreement." However, Macron said the two leaders could find other areas of cooperation. The two leaders are also discussing the ongoing crisis in Syria and the counterterrorism strategies. Trump will then take part in the annual Bastille Day celebrations on Friday.
Now let's take a look at some economic news from Europe.
German consumer prices rose by an average of 1.6% in June, according to new data by the Federal Office for Statistics. The figure compared to inflation rate increases of 1.5% year-on-year in May and 2% in April. Price rises were primarily driven by more expensive foodstuffs. Milk products experienced the steepest increase in cost, with butter up by around 60% compared to last year. However, the relatively stable cost of energy helped to keep overall prices down. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker has claimed that Greece is in a very good state now after the country left excessive deficit procedures on Thursday. His comments came in a meeting with Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras in Greece's second city of Thessalonica. The meeting was held a day after the Commission announced it was taking Greece out of special measures designed to balance the country's books. The Greek leader welcomed the step as a very important message. Spanish consumer prices rose 1.5% in June compared to June last year. According to Spain's statistical office, June's figure comes in 0.4% lower than May, when prices rose 1.9% year-on-year. Spanish consumer prices rose by 2.3% in March and by 2.6% in April. June's figure marks 10 months of continuous year-on-year price rises after previously registering lower prices for 8 months in a row. The Spanish government expects CPI inflation to fall below 1% by the end of the year.
Chinese and U.S. enterprises have signed off on agricultural contracts worth more than $5 billion. The move forms part of the 100-day action plan, which looks to boost trade and cooperation between the two countries.
Thursday's deal was finalized at a signing ceremony in the U.S. state of Iowa in front of nearly 100 officials and a businessman. Under the contracts, Chinese enterprises would import over 12.5 million tons of soybean and 371 tons of pork and beef from the U.S. companies. It follows talks between the Chinese and U.S. presidents in April, when the two sides agreed to carry out a 100-day action plan.
Well, I mean, we are very excited that China is a major market for many of our agricultural products. Soybeans, I think I heard the statistic that 30% of U.S. soybeans are exported to China. That's a very important part of our agricultural economy. More recently, with the opening of China for U.S. beef, that's a very exciting development for the state of Iowa and for our cattle farmers here.
Thursday's contract signing can be taken as one of the first byproducts of the talks and will help boost the trade in each country. China represents huge potential for U.S. exports. With an urbanizing population and a rapidly growing middle class, Chinese appetites are changing, and its citizens have more money for goods.
Today in the signing ceremony here in Iowa, the Chinese buyers and the U.S. buyers, basically they bought the production of the state of Iowa, which is huge because we're #1 in production in soybeans in the United States. So what this means to me personally is this is a guaranteed market that China is out there.
In 2016 to 2017 period, the U.S. shipped over 33 million tons of soybean products to China. Last year, trade between China and the U.S. topped some $76 billion US, 211 times the amount when it first made diplomatic ties.
China's foreign trade is expanding at its fastest pace in more than 5 years. The new data released on Thursday showed the economy continuing to do well despite headwinds from home and abroad.
New customs data show that trade continued to grow strongly in the first 6 months. Exports rose 15% year-on-year, while imports jumped over 25%. That led to a trade surplus of $188 billion US, down 17.7% year-on-year. Total foreign trade volume increased by 19.6% year-on-year in the first 6 months, the quickest pace since the second half of 2011. Analysts said the brisk growth was helped by a lower comparison basis, government support, and a healing global demand. During the first half, trade with the EU jumped 17.4% from the same period last year. Meanwhile, trade with the U.S. and ASEAN both increased by over 21% each. Most of China's exports were machinery, electronics, and labor-intensive products, with their export value accounting for 57% of the total.
Now turning to China, the Fitch Ratings has assigned the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB, its highest possible rating and a stable outlook.
Fitch announced Thursday that it provided the AIIB with a long-term issuer default rating of AAA and a short-term issuer default rating of F1+, based on the bank's existing and expected intrinsic strength. This was the AIIB's second top-notch credit rating in 2 weeks. Previously, Moody's assigned the bank a long-term foreign currency issuer rating of AAA and a short-term foreign currency issuer rating of Prime A with a stable outlook. Fitch said the AIIB has been endowed with a substantial capital base that will support its projected rapid expansion in lending, while its exposure to risk being mitigated by a comprehensive set of policies and high-quality governance. Fitch said the bank enjoys an excellent level of liquidity and should benefit from easy access to capital markets. The Beijing-based AIIB was officially established in December 2015. The Ministry of Commerce, or MOC, said on Thursday China concluded 156 anti-monopoly investigations in the first half of the year, facilitating fair market competition. 67 of the cases involved overseas mergers and acquisitions, or M&A, up 18% year-on-year, accounting for 43% of the total. M&A cases between Chinese companies and overseas firms totaled 45, up 15% year-on-year, accounting for 29% of the cases. Companies in the United States, the European Union, and Japan were among the major M&A participants. The MOC has been actively cooperating with international law enforcement agencies and signed a memorandum of understanding on antitrust cooperation with the market regulator in the UK. The MOC has also been improving the efficiency of antitrust investigations by cutting the average review time. Official data show Thursday China's electricity consumption continued expansion in June as the country's economy stabilized. The National Energy Administration, or NEA, said on Thursday the power used reached 524.4 billion kilowatt-hours in June, up 6.5% year-on-year. In the first 6 months, the power consumption rose 6.3%. In June, electricity use in the service sector jumped 11.1% year-on-year, outpacing the increases in the industrial and agricultural sectors. The growth rate gap reflected positive changes in China's economic structure, as the service industry has expanded faster than other sectors.
As Donald Trump became the 45th president of the United States, the question of how his administration will handle its relationship with Beijing has attracted great attentions across the world. In today's special program, CNC talks to several experts who gave their insights into the future Sino-U.S. economic relations.
Trump comes to power at a time when Washington and other global powers were struggling with an ever-rising tide of trade protectionism. Many are facing an urge to backtrack on globalization. Reports said that the conservative position of Trump's senior advisors and cabinet secretaries indicates that the U.S. government might be tougher on China. The new administration could increase pressure on Beijing regarding trade and currency, among other areas. During his campaign trail, Trump has promised to bring back lost manufacturing jobs by renegotiating free trade deals and levying hefty tariffs on its trade partners. Experts warn that although the change under Trump does offer new opportunities, it could also lead to friction. New tensions could give rise to a trade war or skirmish that they say should be avoided at all costs. Aggressive competition would be damaging to both countries and the global economy.
Trade is going to be the biggest issue. Obviously, he's going to go hard against the so-called free trade deals. He can't abolish free trade, but he can put in certain obstacles which would hopefully assist U.S. industry from getting out of the doldrums that they're in. I don't think that that necessarily leads to a trade war, depending on how he approaches this. And I think also the Chinese would have a certain amount of leeway to cut agreements with Trump, even if he wants to impose tariffs on certain items.
other experts stress that the production line and assembly of goods across many countries means that any changes Trump makes to trade are likely to affect many states.
He has the potential to cause problems for our trade with a lot of countries if he wants. And the problem is that international production these days is very much split across countries. So we never used to have this where some parts of which are made in a dozen countries and assembled in one country and moved on for further assembly in another country. If you put a barrier up in any one of those places, it causes a lot of problems for these companies. And even things that are produced in the U.S. mainly have lots of imported parts. And you can be counterproductive if you put up barriers to imports and actually make it difficult to produce things in your own country because you need those imports for production.
Some warn that tariffs or other hard measures imposed by Trump on China will lead to rising tensions between the two countries.
That said, he made such an issue of China and trade that probably he'll feel compelled to take some harsh measures. He might do something specific in steel, for example, with anti-dumping tariffs, or pick a few products. I think China will almost certainly retaliate. I just hope all of this can be kept at a modest scale, both the initial protectionist moves from the U.S. and the Chinese response.
Experts also warned of the effect of Trump's trade rhetoric and the instability that could follow his policies, particularly any moves toward trade warfare.
Trump said rather incendiary things with respect to tariffs and also U.S. alliances and the burdens that our allies, mainly budgetary burdens, are willing to pay. And so I think it could be a very troubled next period.
President Trump will not necessarily do the specific things he mentioned on the campaign trail. For example, 45% tariff against all Chinese imports. That's a really bad idea. He'll get a lot of advice from business community and others telling him that, full-scale trade war with China is not a good idea.
According to his pre-election promises, Trump will seek to revive the U.S. economy through tax cuts and infrastructure investment. Experts predicted that his policy would have a strong short-term impact in boosting the economy. Among the most important and controversial moves under Trump is that he has officially pulled his country out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, trade deal. The trade agreement was pushed by the Obama administration. Its aim was to promote economic growth among 12 Pacific Rim countries, excluding China. Pankaj Jamawat, professor at the Stern School of Business of New York University, said Trump's decision signaled the government will be more inward-looking.
I regard President Trump's decision to withdraw the U.S. from the TPP process as one manifestation of the turning inward that we see going on in the United States. I think one way of thinking about this is that the standard economic advice is you free up trade, etc. at the borders, and to the extent that there are negative consequences, like increased income inequality, you rely on domestic policy measures to deal with those side effects. In contrast, the approach of his administration seems so far to be let's reduce international interactions and have a free-for-all domestically. So it's very, very different from traditional economic advice about how you handle international economic relations, even when you're putting domestic interests first.
Ann Lee, an economic and financial professor at New York University, had analyzed Trump's plan to discard TPP. She believed that he will replace it with another trade deal, and very likely a similar one.
Trump believes that he's a great deal maker, right? He said that over and over again on the campaign trail, and I'm sure that he would want to cut some kind of deal with China that he believes would be more favorable to the U.S. Even if it's similar to TPP, he's going to basically say that it's more favorable and spin it as such and call it a different name. So it, could be called something Trump's whatever China deal or something, but it's not probably going to be terribly different. I'm sure that after all those months of negotiations, people will basically advise him to take certain elements and go with it.
Jemawat said the new U.S. leader is seeking to renegotiate NAFTA with Canada and Mexico and vowed to tear it up if it cannot work for America. China's currency has been a target since Trump started his campaign, but experts said it's a wrong move for the Trump's administration. Many experts contested Trump's claim that China is a currency manipulator.
It's ironic to be discussing this right now because China is intervening to keep its currency high, not low. So most economists like myself would say that right now China is the farthest thing from a currency manipulator.
Trade between China and the United States reached $558.4 billion in 2015. This is hundreds of times greater than in 1979 when China-U.S. diplomatic relations were established. The United States has become China's second largest trade partner, while China is the U.S. largest trade partner. Experts said it's still too early to estimate the consequences from the Trump administration's policy direction, as the unknowns are more numerous than the knowns.
云天无际，承载梦想。中国南方航空是中国运输飞机最多、航线网络最发达、年客运量最大的航空公司。亚洲第一，全球第三，是南航缔造的业界奇迹。 蓝天壮志情，云海谱华章。
专业的团队，丰厚的经验。
Welcome to Chicago. Welcome to the Lake Cook Law Group.
投资理财、法律咨询，芝加哥专业律师团队为您的梦想提供最安全的保障。
Little Chinese Channel. Lesson 35. In this lesson, we will be learning these 6 Chinese characters. From our last lesson, we learned the character Mu. If we turn this character 90 degrees and take these 2 vertical strokes out and switch them with a small r from lesson 4. This character is 4. 4 means 4. 14 means 14. This character has 4 in it. If we switch the small r, a slightly bigger r. And put a horizontal stroke on top. This character is Xi means west. Xi mian means west or the west side. Make it back into Mu. First, make this, the green horizontal stroke, longer. The orange vertical stroke longer, and the purple horizontal stroke longer. What's this? R means ear. 耳朵 means ears. Turn it back into Mu. and a downstroke to the left on top. Switch these two strokes with one long stroke with a curved hook at the bottom. Make the stroke longer. And put a downstroke to the left over here to make sheng. Sheng, sheng means body. 身高, 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 身高 means height. Time for a new root character. Two strokes with a 弓 from lesson 10. Zuo, zuo, zuo means left. 左手, 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 左手 means left hand. Switch the gong with a ko from lesson 13. This character is yo, yo, yo means right. 右手, 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 右手 means right hand. Okay, it's time to write. Remember when you're writing to follow the stroke sequence. Si, xi, er, 生 左 右 The World Cup. Bye-bye, the lesson is done.